Hello everyone, how you doing? Thanks for coming to see what we're all about. So my name's Jed. I own a company called Campervan We specialise in vehicle-dependent travel parts. Based in Sussex, we have a kind of fabrication side, textile side that does accessories for vans, for people who want to be out there a little bit longer. We never planned on starting up a business. We're a family business. There's me, my partner Louise, and my son Isaac. And we're kind of known for early YouTube videos that we used to make, and we put them out there before there was hashtags and stuff like that. So kind of before there was anything to really watch van related on YouTube. We haven't got a huge, massive following, but we've got a very loyal following. And we kind of only really make one video series a year, so we don't really vlog tons, although you can follow us on our Instagram, campervanculture.com. The history of how we came about dealing with vans and going on trips and taking the road less travelled. You might have seen our vehicles out the front here. Basically, started off on a trip. I was living in London at the time, and kind of embarrassingly, I'd left school and never read a book front to back ever. And then my partner gave me a book, Fiona Campbell, On Foot Through Africa, where a lady walks across Africa, and that whetted my appetite to go to Africa. So I did an overland trip in a truck and drove down to Cape Town. We was in Nairobi and started to spot these trucks that were called overland trucks at the time. So you can see a bunch of trucks there, very basic. Compressor fridges didn't exist then, nor did diesel night heaters or any of the gadgets that we're so fond of these days. This was the campsite, what got me really interested in vehicle-dependent travel. Basically, there'd be like 20 people, you'd all chip in for a space on these trucks, and then you drive all the way through Africa, through the Congo, up into Rwanda, just after the genocide had finished. Again, foolishly, I had no idea about all that kind of stuff that was going on in the world at the time, but soon learnt about it when I was there. More trucks. You notice they all have British plates on there, so they've all been driven down from the UK. Again, this is in Nairobi. The truck on the left is the truck that we spent time on, me and 21 strangers, or 20 strangers at the time. Camping wasn't really done that much inside the vehicle, so we'd all have tents and we'd camp out, basically. We'd have a big fire in the middle to keep the animals away. This is camped in the Serengeti National Park, where you see all the wildlife documentaries filmed. The landscape obviously is completely different to anything in Europe. There's a real eye-opener, and we'd camp every night and cook over open fires. This is one way that we'd cook. So again, there was no kind of some of the equipment that we were lucky enough to own these days. It was just a set of sand ladders, a scaffold pole, and we'd put chickens on there that we'd have to carry live to keep them fresh because we didn't have refrigerators. Or we'd sometimes, on special occasions, have a pig. This kind of smaller camper van was kind of a lot of Swiss would take these, and this made me think that I could maybe do this when I got home. So after the Africa trip, I had enough money to go to India, but it was monsoon. Didn't want to go to India in monsoon, and my partner Louise was going to come with me on that trip. So we bought a Freight Rover van and converted it into a camper van, and we lived in that van with a bunch of other people that we met on the road back in like 1995, and we used to go around all the fruit farms in Kent and pick fruit. And again, this is before the internet, kind of. When I was on the Africa trip, I did hear of a thing called email. One of the guys, his sister worked in Canary Wharf, and she could send letters electronically to a computer, which I don't know whether that ever caught on, but it was something that was introduced to me on this trip. And then while we was waiting around Kent picking fruit, the monsoon had finished. So we'd look at other vehicles to travel with also. It wasn't just trucks or campervans. We'd quite often rent weird, wonderful vehicles, even like a small thing like that, which was pretty nimble for getting around all parts of India. So from the book and not reading, I got into reading, and I started to get inspired on other places to travel while I was in India. This was a book that I read, I believe we ended up in Vietnam, and we was some of the first people to be allowed into Vietnam once the borders were open. So after traveling Asia for quite a while, we ended up in Australia, and we needed a cheap place to live. Volkswagen campervans obviously would be the cool option. We ended up buying a Ford Falcon station wagon, which is pretty much a Granada estate, from a German couple. We converted it into a kind of camper, painted the roof silver because it was 40 degrees on some days. And we lived out of this car for 3 months. Car life, van life, I guess. But again, very simple, cool box, or esky, they call them in there. And we managed to get the car for £700 in Perth. We drove up the west coast of Australia, across the Northern Territory and down to Sydney, where we sold the car for twice the amount of money that we paid for it. There's Louise. And then we bought a house, stayed settled for a while, and then we had a son, Isaac, and we bought that two-wheel drive Volkswagen van that you can see behind the family as a means of escape and for, having some family time together. Now, we went up to Scotland in the two-wheel drive van, and during that time, the threat of snow was always imminent, and then that's when I learned they did a four-wheel drive version of the Volkswagen van that we owned called a Synchro. And then through that, I got to meet two guys, Jake and Russell, and then that's when the YouTube adventures started, 12, or probably longer, basically as soon as YouTube opened, we started making videos. The videos were just us goofing around, taking these vehicles off-road, driving them through the green lanes of Wales and camping out in remote camp spots. And then people started to get interested in what we were doing, and more people were buying vans and looking for the escape and the freedom that a campervan gives you. Sometimes we get stuck. This is actually an open to traffic road in Wales. So we were pushing these vehicles quite far and got familiar with them. All seasons, they were pretty capable. And then the website was created just so we could put all the videos in one place, so people could go and view those rather than get directed and confused and carried on with other stuff on Vimeo, I think was on at the time as well. And we started to sell t-shirts with the little Difflock symbol on, just because the website was costing a little bit of money, and we thought it'd be great if we could maybe one day find the money to fund a trip or even pay for the fuel. So we, three partners, me, myself and Al and Jake, we put in, I think it was £30 each, because we had to buy 25 t-shirts, wondering if we'd ever sell them. 3 months later, we'd sold 800, and there was money in the bank to consider a trip somewhere, so we could plan a trip and make the ultimate, we thought, travel van video. So we went through the maps at the time, decided to go to Morocco, cross the Sahara. Hopefully people would like it, be inspired by it. At the time, the only Morocco map you could get is the big 969 Michelin map. The scale of it was huge. Morocco at that time hadn't been mapped in a detailed way. But you could, as you can see, we highlighted the green as, rough route around Morocco. Again, not very detailed, not showing a lot of detail, obviously, on that. There was a Sahara Overland book by Chris Scott. There were routes on there, but like the Lonely Planets that we used to use back in the day, it was out of date when it was even printed, because by the time they published it, it was already out of date. And if you ran the pistes or the off-road tracks the other way around, it was kind of like turn left at a tree, there's a rock, that kind of thing. And it was kind of tricky. So we bought this this Garmin sat-nav. The sat-navs that you could get there, you could put an SD card in, and we found some Russian military maps. It was the only navigation system we could find that would take these maps, but the maps were made in Russia for the military in 1930. But it was the nearest detailed off-road mapping that we could follow, because it was going to get quite remote. The crossing down to the north of Spain was pretty lively. Has anyone done that crossing? Did you have good weather? It's quite terrible, isn't it? Yeah, never again for me. Yeah. But we arrived and it was beautiful weather in North Spain. Camped out in the middle of Spain on the way down to the ferry, and we soon was in Morocco, and the difference immediately was amazing. These are the roads we were driving. Again, they weren't mapped. We could get bits and bobs off the out-of-date Russian maps. We did, in fact, fit GPS trackers to our vehicles before we left, but we weren't able to access those while we were in Morocco because of the military it's sensitive information. They were very nervous about people visiting in those days. But we could see where we'd been. You see the different colours. As soon as we turn the ignition off, it'd start a new route. So we could kind of, when we got back, we could see where we were. At one point, when we did some of the desert sections, we actually found out that we'd accidentally crossed into the Algerian border, which at the time was closed, and you'd end up in prison for a very long time. Cooking was done outside. We've got vans. We love the kit that we had in there, but ultimately we all like camping and out, being outside, cooking on fire, and that's us cooking our Christmas dinner on 2 Dutch ovens. There's 5 people travelling together. The dinner was pretty good, I must admit. I think it's probably the best one I've ever had. Yes, the carpet buying. You've got to buy one, and I actually enjoy that. But mostly we spent time camping in remote areas like this. You'll notice as well there's not that many pictures of other vans in these stills that we've got, because we didn't really see anybody else, and there weren't people going to Morocco at that time, unfortunately. People you meet along the way, obviously that's a big buzz, and getting invited to their place for tea and spending time with local people is always something fun. And some of the camp spots we did find were just mind-blowing. Pretty much every night was spent in a scenario like that. We made the video and went to quite a lot of effort to do it well. I'm still pretty proud of that. There's Louise looking what I was doing up there. So yeah, as we got towards the deserts, it got wider and wider. You can see tracks there. The Russian maps on the sat nav, where they were made in a certain way that every time you went over a track, you was a metre over or a foot over. So you can imagine by the time from 1930 till the 90s, you could actually find yourself quite a few kilometres away from the track, the initial track, and that quite often would get you into trouble. There's another desert camp. There were a lot of those over the 3 months. Quite often we'd see a victim of the rough roads. Land Rover, obviously. But could make you quite nervous seeing things like that. Gorges as well, you had to be careful because there could be floods or rain in the mountains, and that those pistes could get washed out quickly, so you needed to check like locally what the seasonal weather was in that area. Breakdowns, yes, we had them. The corrugations on the road were pretty punishing, to a point where they'd undo the bolts on your doors so your door might fall off. That point was the filler on the engine for the oil, where it'd shake so much. Luckily, we just pulled over for a sandwich, and we noticed oil all on the floor, so we had to freewheel down the top of Todra Gorge all the way down, and got that fixed by a guy with a flip-flop, 2 batteries, some cable, and a welding rod. Held it down with his flip-flop, and he welded that tube, and that tube's actually still going today. We had to take spare fuel with us, obviously, on the desert crossings. We didn't know how much fuel we'd need, because obviously you do use more fuel across sand, and we fitted the vehicles with these snorkel intakes, so that would help the air filters as a pre-filter. We had to be careful when filling up with jerry cans also, because desert dust is like talcum powder. It isn't granularly sand as such, so you have to be careful when filling up. And that is a repair that I had to make, where the shock absorber, the bolt had come out the top because of the shaking. So luckily we found that piece of rod which was in a fence. We had fun the whole time we was there as a family, and just running free in the desert was pretty good. Some of the roads that were marked as roads weren't always roads. Again, the Russian maps were slightly out, so it wasn't unusual that we'd have to drive across a road that was kind of, well, should we just say sketchy? And yeah, that was that. So I was lucky enough last year to get invited back to Morocco after all this time. And this is a friend of mine's truck. He basically drove me around for 2 weeks. And it was good to go back again, because Morocco now is very popular. Has anyone been or planning on going to Morocco, all in the motorhome? Have you been already or going, or? Been, okay. So what we found this time, the apps and stuff, and obviously, I mean, who uses Park for Night? I use Park for Night. I think we all use it sometimes, pretty useful. And Mark had gone over there, watched our videos, and Park for Night is now a big thing everywhere. It can be a double-edged sword. It's a very useful app, safety net, but excuse me, it does mean that people we found were just going from Park for Night to Park for Night, and they planned the whole trip around doing this route around Park for Night, which is great, but then there can be complaints of people turning up selling stuff, not in a kind of nasty way or persistent selling or whatever, but obviously if you've got Park for Night, then the people selling stuff, the hawk, whatever you call them, street sellers, vendors, whatever, and they use the app too to find their customer base. So if you think you're trying to be sold something that you don't particularly want, and you make YouTube videos, just please bear in mind that these people, they have to get by somehow. Just like when you're making your YouTube videos, you may be selling your audience maybe a hipster health shake or a VPN that they don't particularly want. We're all people, and we've all got a means to an end, and that's pretty much the same. So if we just kind of be a bit more respectful to each other and like embrace each other, it's a nice thing to do. So on this trip back last year, you'll see at the back there's a 2-wheel drive car, a Honda, and that belonged to a guy called Carl, who's a friend of Mark's he hadn't seen for 25 years. He drove down to meet us, and it was an absolute buzz having him with us. And for his first time, kind of fresh meat approach to Morocco, and we buzzed off him buzzing about being there. Carl's a big guy, he's an ex-policeman, works in traffic, and he's used a stinger a lot in his career. So he got loads of, are there any kids in here? He got loads of shit off us for the driving around with a yellow Space Saver wheeling. Yeah, soon to see camels, and Carl was getting everywhere with us in this two-wheel drive car and his roof tent, and we'd end up places that we usually maybe wouldn't have found. We were hungry one day, and there's a bunch of ladies came up to us asking us if we were hungry in Arabic, but we couldn't speak Arabic, so we just went with them anyway, and they took us to the community centre. So Ramadan was happening, and they were making some kind of cake pastry thing, and they invited us in for food. It could go one of two ways, we didn't know. So we had this amazing tagine that they had on the go. At the time we didn't realise it was their dinner that they gave us, but it was really, really good. As we entered the building, there was a doormat at the front door. Mark, the guy with the glasses, he went in there, wiped his feet on the doormat, and all the women started freaking out. And I'm like, look, you need to take your shoes off. They probably don't want your shoes on. So he took his shoes off, continued to wipe his feet. And then the pastries they were making, they'd put them outside by the door to dry. Mark thought that was the doormat. Luckily, they saw the funny side, and we still ate their dinner. So back to the first trip out there to Morocco. We came back from that, made the video. It was a big success, and this is our business running from my attic a few years ago before we got business premises, kitchen table kind of set up. But we were ready again after a while to hit off on another adventure. So we'd learnt a lot from Morocco. We'd kitted the vans out pretty good, and this time we were going to head up to the Arctic Circle. Now, you'll see our big truck out there, and we were using the Westie, the 4x4 Synchro at the time, and it was soon apparent that we needed to carry more stuff, especially going through more expensive countries where it's £8 or £12 for a can of beer. And that's what Norway, the prices are. It was £8 for a courgette, which was quite expensive. So we'd fill up in Germany with crates of beer, but they wouldn't last long. And then it became apparent we'd need a truck. Also, we were torn between taking the bikes or the kayak, and I'd like to take both, but we can now. That's part of the reason we got the truck. So, anyone been up to Norway, Arctic Circle? That's good. 24-hour daylight. There's no rush to find a park up because it's daylight the whole time. It takes a little bit of getting used to with the, trying to get to sleep and stuff. The ferries between islands are really cheap. For an hour's crossing is usually about £25. Salmon's cheap. And you can buy reindeer steak, which is pretty good. That's not too expensive. The camp spots were amazing, as you'd expect. And the main road through Sweden, top to bottom, which is the E35, I think. That's it. You can basically stop there. You don't see cars on there for ages. That's the main road through Sweden. Made the video for that as we was going. Lunch stops are brilliant. And then we'd had this guy. We had an Audi follow us for about 18 kilometres. And I thought he was trying to pull us over, flashing his lights. I thought he was wanted some trouble, so we pulled over, expecting the worst. And he had one of our shirts on when he got out. He just wanted to say hi. So we got back, and then we found the truck, the one that's outside, the Manigan. So it's a flatbed truck. A few people have been asking about that. I think you've been pretty interested in the van over the weekend and what we do. So that's what it was like when we got it, when we found it in the barn in Holland. You can see size difference, obviously. So I used to go over there as it was being built and do a bit of work and stuff on there. I designed the box in SketchUp, Before the box was even built, I'd already built the furniture for it, and they all fitted in pretty good. The doors and the fronts are all made from dye bond, which is actually a McDonald's roof that I got from a skip. Not that I was being cheap, but like I'm not going to get all cosmic about upcycling and stuff like that, but it was there. I was going to buy it anyway, so I made good use of that. There's the torsion-free frame for the truck, and there's the box before it was fitted to the truck. We did that in Holland and then drove the box and the truck back to England where I fitted that out, and that took a year. There's a truck united with its burden, which is with the box, and then that took us to our first trip that we made after it was finished, where we went to Transylvania. There's us at the ferry port, the tunnel, just about to get on the tunnel where the slave cylinder went, and we had to get recovered back home before even leaving the country. It was just a small 20 pence seal, but you know, that stuff happens. Easily fixed and easily on our way again. We'd got to the continent, and then we noticed that our number plate was missing. Now, if there's a tip that I can give any of you guys here today, please carry a spare number plate front and back, because you won't get those replaced when you're in Europe. And when you're crossing borders now with being British, we're all still being taught a lesson for leaving the EU, and police can make it very difficult for you every opportunity just to teach you a lesson for our government's choices. Wild camping was great on the way. This is in Hungary, and then we reached Romania, where there's absolute no end of wild camp spots. And I've got to say, Park for Night was very useful in that country for finding these spots. It was superb, actually. Bears are a problem. You have to be careful. They do exist, and that they're not shy. And the road conditions are worse than Morocco. So this was a standard road, single track mainly, and you are encouraged to use that bit of gravel when you pass other cars. It's actually better. The road is actually worse than no road, so it's pretty punishing. So if you've got anything that's, I don't know, that doesn't like being shaken around, you may want to try sticking to the more main roads. We did get punctures. That's one of the, on obviously the truck. Each tyre weighs 120 kilos. That's Louise, my partner. She's, you know, a little bit bigger than the wheel, but between the two of us, we managed to get together, change the wheel at the side of the road, and get that fixed. So we made that video series, and then we went down to the Pyrenees, where we planned to drive coast to coast. We found the trails, and we made fantastic use of those. Every opportunity to pull up at wild camp spot is amazing. These roads can actually be driven by a two-wheel drive car, most of them. So as long as you've got some ground clearance and you haven't got a big overhang on your motorhome, you should be fine. And then even in the summer, you get snow up there. That's the highest point in Andorra, which is the border of France and Andorra. And this is a route around there called the smuggler's route, or the tobacco route. And it's a route that they used to smuggle, or still do smuggle, things backwards and forwards from Spain to Andorra, because Andorra is a tax-free or a low-tax country. Yeah, you have to be careful. I don't think that bridge, we should have gone over that, but we did, and it was fine. That took us into Spain. Does anyone recognise that point? It's some famous, everyone's got that picture of the van, haven't they, or truck. We had some weird stuff happen there. I mean, I don't want to go too far into it because, for one reason or another. But a terrible thing happened there, actually, and you have to remember, crappy things do happen to normal people, and Isaac ended up in intensive care for 19 days. It was a bit hit and miss there for a while. This could have happened at home, but because it was away, it then becomes a holiday thing. So we were quite nervous to travel for quite a while after that. And we were actually very nervous, but then that summer we had the COVID outbreak. So we decided to concentrate our efforts back into the business. Well, we moved our business 20 minutes from here in Sussex, got a big warehouse, and got busy fixing that out. And we were all locked up for so long that we were ready to travel again after that. Spent a few trips out around, went up to Suffolk actually. I don't know if anyone's been up there, it's pretty good. Place you'd think never to go, like Ipswich for your holidays. But yeah, that was really good. But we are totally ready for travel again now. And we have had opportunities to do other van trips with customers we've got who are around the globe. Following on from the Morocco trip with Mark, Isaac and I ventured over to Baja, Mexico last year in the red van there that belongs to a friend of ours. Baja's amazing. Bit like kind of the Morocco for Americans, I guess. And we'd stay at these little places. This is a thing called a palapa, which is a little hut you can rent, stay there for a while, and people bring you food and drinks a lot. And then we bought the little yellow van that's out there from a children's entertainer called Captain Coconut in Cornwall, who was a Rastafarian pirate. So we picked that up on the recovery truck, and it was all painted in Rasta colours. It wasn't everyone's cup of tea. I absolutely hated the Rasta colours when I picked it up, but I absolutely loved it by the time I got back. But we kept the yellow of the base van, and then we called it, it's a Vanagon, so we call it the Vanaguan, because we kept the Rasta feel. And I know he left his scarf in there and a few other bits, we kept those in. But we are planning on possibly shipping that to Baja, Mexico, where you can keep a vehicle on a temporary import permit for 9 years. And then that'll allow us to use a van over there. And then if we've got friends going, or if any of you guys fancy a borrow, you're more than welcome. But once it's there, we can do that. So that's us, that's Campervan culture, and that's how our business started, and that's how we made videos, and that's a little bit about our adventures. So thanks for watching.
Thank you, Chad.